Mike, you have passed the halfway point. You are at the northernmost tip of the UK today in Thurso, stuck in inside because the weather conditions have been wild out there for 2 days straight. Hopefully rounding the next bend tomorrow, which will be great. How is the circumnavigation feeling for you so far?
Do you know what, the whole thing in its entirety, I would describe it as being the most physically demanding thing that I have ever done, which is to be expected. I'm not even attaching any analysis of how the circumnavigation has gone with regards to it's been good, it's been bad, or whatever. It's just been what it has been. But the thing that I've kind of come to realize in the last few days of this trip is that the hardship that I have endured with the weather in particular, hampering my progress, has actually forced me to fundamentally change my approach. And I feel actually changed as a person because of what I've had to endure and continue on through. And so whilst whilst this is not what I expected, or these outcomes weren't at the forefront of my mind when I was taking this on, there is part of me that is grateful for the hardship that I've had to endure up until this point.
The most painful thing that you've gone through. Yeah. And that was what you were training for, right? Is like you knew that this would be the most painful. What about it? What was that feeling of going from like knowing that conceptually to then actually experiencing it?
So one of the things that is really interesting about your kind of expectations or perceptions of what something will be is often way off the mark. And, some of my training was horrible, like truly horrible. Commuting to work through the winter, going against the tide on the Thames to get home at 11 o'clock after doing a 10-hour day at work with 4 kilometers of shouldering your kayak down the embankment is a horrible way to get your miles in. But even doing stuff like that, I guess it's completely blown out of the water by the sheer relentlessness of what a trip like this looks like. You can do 100k paddle as a one-off, and once you've got through that, you're done. The thing is, if you do 100k paddle here, once you're through that, you've got at least another 31 100k paddles to do. And it's just, with the weather conditions, it's highly unlikely that you'd ever be able to do that mileage. So the effort that it took to do that 100k paddle, the same effort may only get you 60 kilometers tomorrow. And then the same effort that you do then, that might only get you 40. And then it's just, this is the thing that's been really tricky to articulate. And I think whenever people look at my Strava and say, oh, Mike, you did 110 kilometers that day. And yeah, those 110 were hard. But there are some days where I've covered 60 kilometers and I genuinely have feared that I couldn't get on the water the day after because they have taken so much out of me physically and psychologically. And so overcoming that aspect of this trip has been something that you cannot prepare for until you do these multi-day events.
Yeah. What was one of the worst days for you with that?
Yeah. So do you know what? This is what the RNLI guys today asked me. Just like, if you had any good days and your bad days. And I was like, I could probably count my good days on like 3 fingers. But the bad days, there have been a few. And the one that sticks out head and shoulders isn't anything to do with any of the biggest tidal races of the UK. nothing to do with any of the points around the UK that you may think you may have had difficulty around, but actually it was crossing from the Isle of Islay to the Isle of Mull. And the reason why I had such a bad day there is because I took some dodgy local advice initially, and then I layered on that dodgy local advice with some poor decision on my behalf. And that put me in a situation where I was forced to do this open bay crossing from Islay to Mull in an incredibly exposed area of coastline with a hell of a lot of features. And so when I was doing that, the weather was also tipping it down, so the visibility was poor. So you go from Islay, I went north of Colonsay, so that is already, you're exposed to large ocean swell there. You throw on top of that a storm that was occurring in the Atlantic, which wasn't anywhere close to the weather radar where I was, but was creating waves that were still having impact on that side. They were between 6 and 8 foot of ocean swell. I then had 20 mile an hour of tailwind, which was the thing that I was looking at and thinking, I'm going to have a flipping fantastic day today. So I was looking at the tailwind, and then because I got on the water at the wrong time, the tide was actually going out when I wanted it with me. So it was pulling around the corner. So the tide was going this way, the wind was going this way, and then the swell was going that way. And then this bay is full of reefs and full of these low-lying islands that you can't really see until you're about 200 or 300 meters away from them. And so what was happening is that you get these periods that were tolerable, and then you get these other periods where, you know, the swell is trying to throw your boat over here, and you're wanting to go here, but the swell is pushing you towards the reefs. The tide is sucking you back to Northern Ireland, and I got off the water that day. I didn't think that I was ever going to need the Coast Guard, but I did think that if I don't get in soon, I'm gonna really, really be in a mess.
Wow.
And so that was close to my threshold. My threshold's dislocating my shoulder and swimming one-armed back into shore.
Which is a great story.
Yeah.
But yeah, wow. That's how many hours were you out there doing that?
I can't even remember. I think it was
probably felt like
it felt like an eternity. It was awful. I think I was about there 7 or 8 hours. And yeah, it was only probably for the last 3 hours that I could actually see land. And when you're coming up to Mull, it's actually really, because there's loads of little islands around there, it's really hard to know which point you're aiming for.
And it was cold too, right? Because at this point, you're also really far north.
Yeah, and we were also, prior to that, we're getting a lot of northerly winds. I mean, there have been times when I've been camping on the beach and it's been 6 degrees at night. And there are loads of times that I've seen like 10, 11, 13 degrees in the middle of the day, which is a piss take.
Oh my God, not what you want in the middle of June.
No, it's not what I prepared for. If I'm being all honest, like being completely honest, I don't have for quite a few days. I was wearing every single item of kit that I have,
and only now washing it at your stoppage.
Yeah. Oh my God. I prior to being in Thurso, I was getting to the point where I was getting sick of my own company because I stank.
Oof.
I'd make a sheepdog smell like Cameron Diaz or something like
that. To be at that point and to think like, oh my God, I might need to call the Coast Guard if I can't get in soon. And then to still kind of push through it. How did that feel when you think about the aspect of resilience that's been so important to your like philosophy and approach around this journey?
Do you know what? It's interesting because doing this, I have never felt weaker in my whole life. Taking this on, it's been so emotional. It's been so emotional. It's broken me right down to the smallest little piece that I feel like I could possibly be. And so I think often when we think about what does it feel to feel resilient, that's not how I feel. I feel weak. I feel pathetic. I honestly, I don't feel strong at all. And I feel like that is the complete counter of how you would describe resilience. So it's funny. I think for me, with this, I almost put the resilience thing to one side and I try not to think about it. I just think about what do I need to do, because I've made the decision to do this, and I won't let emotions change that decision, if that makes sense. Because I know that if I were to quit now, in about 12 hours time of sitting on that nice comfy sofa, I'll be like, what the hell have I done? And so I know comfort and relaxation will come. So I can't let my desire to be in a position where I'm more comfortable influence the decision of getting this done now, because I know it will lead to a huge amount of regret. And so there are lots of negative reinforcement and lots of positive reinforcement that are both driving me. And it's probably, if I'm being honest, it's the negative that is probably the hard wall that pushes me along. Because, you know, when you're going through a really tough time, a sense of accomplishment is not what motivates me to, like, you know, if you're in a position where you're genuinely really concerned that you're going to make land, and someone was to come up to you and be like, Mike, but think about how good you'll feel afterwards. Like, sod that. It's not worth it. So it's actually, for me, and I know people would probably have an opinion that this may not necessarily be the most healthy motivation, but it is the one that is the hard line for me, where it's like, I know I will regret this if I don't do it. And I know that I've put so much into this over the last 2 years to be in even just be in the position where I could physically accomplish something like this, that to quit now because I'm sad or because I'm tired, I just think that would be the most pathetic excuse. Because I've been through it all now. So I just need to get through this second half. I need to get through the Pentland Firth. And, you know, I will do it, but it's tricky. I certainly don't feel tough and resilient.
I think resilience technically is something like bounce back.
Like Chumbawamba, you get knocked down, you get back up again.
So as long as you're getting out there, technically you are resilient.
So one of the things that I've tried to do on social media, and I think I've probably done it, and I am also very aware that I don't want to come across as I'm whinging too much about everything, is to give an honest account of what it's been like doing this. And I think a lot of people that take on challenges like this, you know, from quite like adventurers, quite macho, just like, oh yeah, you know, only the brave, and all this stuff. And I just don't identify with any of that. And so what I've wanted to do is bring this honest and this balanced approach to what I'm doing, where there is doubt, there are concerns, there is also positivity and optimism, because without those you just won't do it. But if, for full disclosure, this is really quite a out of body experience, but on the day that I went around Cape Wrath, I built that moment up in my head so much that I actually cried before I got on the water. And I just absolutely dreaded that. Absolutely dreaded that. And the funny thing is, just after I stopped crying, there's this guy on his morning run. He came up to me and he was like, "Oh, you guys, like, where are you going off today? Do you mind if I get a picture?" And so, like, I have literally just stopped crying, and then it's just like there's this photo of like me, this guy, and his dog just smiling on the beach. As like inside, I am truly dying.
Oh no.
And then and then I went and did it, and I was just like, what was all that about? What was all that about? I built that way up in my head. And so there have been elements of this that have been worse in imagination than in reality. And then there have been many other bits that I thought would be fine and have been terrible. So, yeah, I will openly admit that I have cried before I went around Cape Wrath. Oh, God.
That's great. And then got lucky with the weather, and it was a smooth run, right?
It was
Unlike
a smooth run. It was a bitch towards the second half of the day because it was a pumping headwind, but I caught the window around it, so it was okay.
Wow. Oh my gosh. That's amazing. I love that. It's like, you're like, yeah, photo op.
Yeah.
Well, I think, being like honest and vulnerable and open about your mental health too is part of what started you on this journey to begin with, right? After your mom passed. How does that, and she's of course still the reason why you've taken this on. You've raised a lot of money already for aortic dissection charitable trust and RNLI as well. How do you carry your mom and that grief with you?
Do you know what? So, and again, this is something that I feel like I've learned on this north coast of Scotland, is that every day you go out on the water, it is going to hurt physically. It may hurt psychologically. I've got these really nasty wounds in my armpits that, as I'm talking to you right now, they are stinging. Let alone my hands when you're trying to hold the paddle, they hurt so much. And one of the things that I've realized on this north coast is that every time I get off the water, I don't need to relive that chapter of pain again, because when I get off, it's done. It's finished. I don't have to do that bit again. I don't have to experience that again. And before I got to this point in this paddle, I felt like I was holding on to, particularly when I did this Severn Estuary crossing and then Ireland, the pain of that was huge. It was, I could bet, it took me about 3 hours to get to sleep afterwards because I was in so much pain. And it's only in the last week or so that I've realized that once I'm off the water, I can put that down. I don't need to think about it again. And actually, there is very little value in picking up that pain and feeling it again. Sometimes you need a reminder to, so you don't make the same mistakes that you made previously. You need to know what that was like or remember what it was like so you don't repeat it. But having that, and someone can tell you this, but when you actually put yourself in a situation where you actually have to apply it, it's this almost visceral learning experience that I feel I've been able to almost apply to all aspects of my life. Losing mum in the manner that I did was so unbelievably painful, but actually realizing that there are certain elements of the pain that I felt around that I am allowed to put down has been huge, to be honest, because there have been elements of what I'm doing that, one of the reasons why I wanted to do this was almost to, again, and this is not a healthy processing tactic, but this is what I feel I needed to do, was almost to legitimize my grief and the the horrendous experience that I had, this is what I decided to do to almost legitimize what I went through. And no one should ever be in a position where they feel like they need to legitimize their grief at all. You shouldn't ever have to feel like that. But for one reason or another, that's how I felt. And it wasn't something that I could talk myself out of. This was something that I had to go and explore why it was that I felt like this. And this was that. And it's only now on this North Coast that I feel like I've endured enough to finally give myself permission to put down some of the pain that I felt, and in some small way almost move on from that. But one of the things I've realized, that by letting go of some of the pain that I experienced, I'm not letting go of mum. I'm not letting go of the memory of her. I'm not resigned for her to disappear into the annals of history. I am letting go of an aspect of her loss that doesn't serve me or her memory. And there's moving on through grief. You don't ever really move on, but that, I feel, is a big chapter in moving through your grief. And because sometimes grief can be so painful, you just want to sit in it and you don't want to move on. You don't want to accept that it's happened. And so quite often you just stay in this phase, because it provides a certain degree of comfort, but it is also, for me, I think it was, or had the potential to be, destructive.
Yeah. And you've taken that potential for destructiveness and then channeled it into your circumnavigation.
Yeah.
And then you're going to put it all down.
Yeah. Doing a trip like this has made me think a little bit more broadly about how I live my life. And I feel like in some regards, this is like a pilgrimage.
Yeah. And,
you know, in various religions, where it's Muslim faith, Christian faith, quite often religions encourage you to take one journey of pilgrimage in your life. That's why Muslims go to Mecca. Some Christians will hike along the north of Spain. I'm not a spiritual guy, but you get thinking about things like that, particularly when you are so utterly exposed to variables completely outside of your control. And I think actually by committing myself to a journey like this has forced me to develop aspects of my character that would have been completely neglected. Like I feel like I'm so much better at positive self-talk now, which I think is a huge thing, because like honestly, when both my watches went on the South Coast, I was like, Mike, you are just a twat. And I haven't thought like that in a long time.
You're like, even my watches don't like me.
Yeah, like my headphones have gone again. Oh, but yeah, there are certain things that I feel that you can't attain without doing stuff like this. And so I started this for my mum and for my processing and to raise awareness. But I feel like I'm observing changes in my character that just wouldn't have occurred had I ever done anything like this.
That's incredible. What's like an example of some new positive self-talk? Because I think this is really important, and it's something that, like, personally, I am actively working on a lot right now as well.
Yeah. Do you know what? It's so and you can probably get this from me on my social media. I like to try and be as positive as possible, but it's not just this blanket positivity. When someone says, "Oh, tomorrow's going to be better," I'm not like, well, actually, where's your evidence for that? I feel like when people are like, "Oh yeah, but you'll be fine," I feel like when you're in an environment that I'm in right now, that attitude actually is dangerous. You've got to believe that you can endure something. And so one of the things that I switched in my mind, and this isn't necessarily feeding into the self-talk, but it's a change in mentality, is stop wishing for things to be easier, but wish that I was stronger. And that in itself was a shift. When it comes to the positive self-talk, it was about actually giving yourself the positive self-talk based on actual evidence. So it was like meaningful positive self-talk, not the you can do it or just go smash it. It's like, it's nothing like that. It's about, well, it's not like that for me, at least, because I feel like superficial positive self-talk doesn't provide me with any real reassurance, because I feel it doesn't address the certain aspects of whatever you're going through. Whenever it comes to creating positive self-talk for a certain situation, it's specific to the situation. And so it's okay, right, what have we got to do? Okay, is it a bay crossing? Right, Mike, you've done these bay crossings. Okay, right, so you've proved to yourself that you can do it. Is it an open water crossing? Right, Mike, you've done these open water crossings. You can do this. And it's like, right, okay, what do I do if this goes wrong? Okay, so Mike, you know what to do if things go wrong. It's reminding yourself that you have the skills to endure it, rather than be like, you can do it. It's focusing that positive energy on something that's tangible.
Yeah. That's been my experience as well, actually. So that really resonates for me.
Yeah.
Because I feel the same. That's like the fake, like, yeah, you can do it. Like, it does nothing for me.
No, it doesn't. It's just, oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. But if I sit there and I'm like, oh my God, I'm such a screw up. Why am I so bad at this? Why can't I do it? Why is it so hard? And then change to like, okay, think about the really, really hard things that you've done before.
Yeah.
Also why I won't take off my DW bracelet. I'm like, you've done DW.
Yeah, and if you've done that, you've put yourself through a hell of a lot. So and I find having meaningful positive self-talk is actually incredibly powerful.
Yeah. Yeah, and you know that you can also, you know, you've done an open water crossing before, you've got another one coming up, right? It's not just that it means you can do it, but in fact, the next one you're doing will build that experience even further and make you even better at it.
Exactly. And once you know that you can do something, that task loses a certain degree of its power over you.
Yeah, I think that's very, very powerful. This has been amazing. Thank you so much, Mike. Is there anything else that you want to add?
Some people romanticize about what I'm doing, and I just wish they were out in the water with me, because there is so much unbelievable beauty. This is a once in a lifetime experience I'll never forget, and there's so much that I will miss and love about this trip, but there's a hell of a lot that I wouldn't ever want to repeat. Yeah, but no, Betsy, thank you.
Thank you.